So how is it living outside in Maui?
Maui's the first place I've ever lived outside where I actually felt like I was a homeless person.
Elaborate.
The weather is great. The people are very, very generous. My lifestyle is almost middle class, except for the fact that the distinction between householders and homeless people on Maui is carved in stone, and we're separated some places literally by barbed wire. Physically, living on Maui is wonderful. It's just what you would expect, going camping on Maui and never going home.
Are you treated like a subclass of
That's
people?
exactly the point. The people are very generous to the dogs at the animal shelter, the feral cats, and the homeless people. And they don't want any of them around them, actually. They just want to be nice.
Okay.
And that's the biggest problem on Maui, is there's no way to break the barrier between homeless and householder.
A lot of the people I see here that are homeless, the implication is that they are drug addicts, that they are lazy, or that they have mental issues that make them that would make people a lot more nervous, I think, to approach them, or even more so to have them be approached.
Perhaps in a way that makes sense. But on the other hand, the people who live in apartments and the people who live in houses, and a lot of the people who own houses and own the apartment complexes, are addicted to alcohol and are addicted to drugs and steal and subvert and commit a lot of more of what we call white-collar crimes. But ultimately, the white-collar criminal that you feel comfortable with will do $5 million worth of damage to your community all by himself, while the entire shoplifting potential of your entire homeless community is something under $500,000 a year.
Well, sure, we read about the politicians and stuff that are doing those massive crimes, and
Well, you also read about the people committing murders.
sure,
The guy that shot up those people in Florida was not homeless.
yeah,
As a matter of fact, he had an address on his gun permit. There's no protection there. The answer to the question, the bigger question concerning the homeless as a class, is maybe a little bit windy, but you already have in the United States, thank you very much, already have in the United States laws forbidding vomiting on the park benches downtown and laying down in it. The fact that a homeless person does it doesn't make it more illegal, more distasteful. If a householder did it, it would be just as big a problem. My point is, you can enforce that law as it stands. You don't have to add the word homeless to it. It's just illegal to do that. The same thing is true of murdering people, stabbing people with knives, buying and selling methamphetamines, prostitution. All of those things are already illegal, and the penalties for them are rather severe, and they're not being enforced in any noticeable way whatsoever. Adding another law or two that you don't intend to enforce isn't going to make it any better. If you intended to enforce your laws, I would recommend beginning by enforcing the laws you already have. It's already illegal for a rich man or a poor man to beg for bread on the streets in America. Enforce that law if you don't like panhandlers. And if you pick up mostly poor people, okay, now your sociologists have something to work with in their projects. But from a legal standpoint, From the culture's standpoint, the only two solutions to the homeless problem, ultimately, are to treat people who live outside the same as everybody else and treat us as being subject to the same laws and enforce those laws. Or tell yourself some story about some relocation camp you've got for us and pull a Hitler on us.
When people talk about solutions to homelessness, is essentially build a camp, build housing, and it tends to be a facility that's out away from most of civilization.
Well, it's a partial solution for part of the problem, but if you don't have any trouble accepting the fact that they're Buddhist black people and Christian Asians, you shouldn't have any trouble accepting the fact that the homeless community is not homogeneous. We weren't all squirted into the same mold or anything. There are a lot of people out here who are straight up homeless. They're failed householders. They didn't make the cut.
Failed householders.
They should be in homes. Help them. Make homes they can afford. By the same token, the upper middle class has a significant percentage of their 30-year-old offspring living in the basement because there are no homes for them either. We have a national housing shortage. So, rehabilitate your drug addicts. Get them off the street that way. Rehabilitate your alcoholics. Get them off the street that way. You already promised your God, for crying out loud, that you would take care of your orphans and your unwed moms and your honorably disabled veterans and those guys that you're not taking care of. By the time you take care of the stuff you already promised you would do, the number of us still living outside would be so small you would scarcely notice us. And at that point, I would say, as advice to you, get used to the fact that some people live outside, and as advice to the other people who live outside with me, fight them if you have to, but don't get on the bus. It never turns out well for us.
So the number of people that are voluntarily living outside, you think is very small in your experience?
Actual, what the Bible would call sojourners, what our American mythos calls outdoorsmen, mountain men, that kind of people, maybe 10-15% of the total outdoor population at any given time. There's times when it was more, times when it was less. For example, in the 50s, there was virtually nobody voluntarily living outside. They had taken care of the hobos from the Depression in rather horrifying ways, and it wasn't until the 60s and the peace movement that, as a form of political protest, a lot of people moved outside. And as you might expect, a percentage of them decided we liked it better out here and never went home.
Well, exactly. Like you said at the beginning of this interview, that it's you're going camping and never
not going home.
There's not an end to the
That's
weekend.
right.
It sounds kind of nice.
Well, not to play any political cards or anything, but they did tell me when I got out of the Army that with my education and my physical condition, I could do whatever I wanted to. And if that's true and what I wanted to do was go camping, I don't see how I've done anything wrong.
Sure.
The problem is determining who's having the homeless problem. If it's a problem with the way the park smells when the homeless people move in, you can rent a porta potty that'll take care of 40 people and keep it emptied for roughly the same price as keeping any one of those people in jail.
Well, that seems to be a problem that I see here in Hawaii and in Maui, that the public bathrooms close at night. There are no porta potties. There is a massive homeless population. So what are their options?
That's a joke that the devil is playing on God's people. If you ask them why they close the bathrooms, they'll tell you that they close the bathrooms because drug dealers and drug addicts tend to congregate there. Now, if I'm an honorable supervisor of an honorable law enforcement agency who honestly desires to find, corral, arrest and remove from the street drug dealers and drug addicts. Having the bathroom open would seem to me to be a good thing.
Corral them in
Having
one place.
one of my
Don't make your
people
busts.
drop by once in a while and nab anybody who happens to fit that description would be an even better thing. The reason that we don't want that is because you would so easily be able to see how easy it is to identify the drug dealers, and you would be able to wonder why the more cops you hire, the more drug dealers there are.
It's back to the not enforcing the existing laws.
If you were
and that's not the
willing to
intention.
enforce the existing laws, here's an idea. Pay your cops a living wage, or better. Treat them like knights in armor used to be treated in the days of King Arthur. Make theirs an honorable position, and lower the boom like the French guillotine on any of them that cross the line. You remove any incentive for corruption that way. You gotta start where you've gotta start. You gotta get over your attitude towards homeless people. You also gotta get over your attitude towards the cops. It would also help if you got over your attitude towards like school teachers and stuff, in case you haven't checked that out. You've got a big attitude problem in this country.
The attitude, it's all interrelated.
It all is tied to each other. There's no way to look at any part of it without getting your fingers in all of it.
And
There's too much opinion molding and not enough opinion forming going on. Everybody's looking for the person that they can say, yeah, I believe what he says. But what do you say?
typically when you do share opinions like you are right now, it's met with a lot of resistance, and the question is, well, who said that? You know, where did you get that from?
You were facing me. You saw my lips moving. You know damn good and well I said that.
So, and speaking of the police, what is the normal interaction like?
The overwhelming majority of cases, it's extreme courtesy on both sides. It's fairly easy to tell it's the homeless person who's scared. Sometimes the fear, because you know that this guy actually has the power to take away your freedom and stuff. For the most part, I've cops stop by and talk to me about, have you seen a guy on a stolen gray scooter go by here lately? And they treat me the same as they would anyone else they were questioning in the park. Unless someone complains to them, they really do feel like they have a lot better things to do with their time than mess with homeless people.
Well, because what's their solution going to be? What kind of enforcement can they really do that's going to change?
My question has always been and will always be, if you tell me I can't stay here, I've got to go. My question's going to be, go where? And more often than not, the answer I get is, I don't care, just not here. And if I could figure out what their address was, I would take them at their word. And I'd go camp on their front yard and say, but you said you didn't care as long as it wasn't there. So now let's get real. You clearly do care. Where? Are you just going to kill us all? Are you going to put us somewhere where we can't even conceivably walk into town still smelling like a human being and do anything like look for a job or anything like that? You're going to put us someplace where you know for a fact there's 1,500 bunks and just not notice that 20,000 of us have been processed into the place? How are you going to deal with it? It's you that's going to deal with it. We're either going to go along with you or fight back based on our enlightened self-interest. But you guys are going to be who deals with it.
So,
and if you blow it, it'll be blown.
Speaking of what you said a minute ago about being placed somewhere that you can't walk into town still smelling like a human, and I think I've heard you talk about this before, and it's interesting perspective you don't normally hear, which is when people say, oh, this person's homeless, they're young, they're fit, they're they could hold down a normal job. Why don't they get a job? Why don't they work? And I think a lot of things we don't consider stuff I've heard you like you to touch on regarding what do you do if you do clean yourself up and you've got you're fresh shaven, you're smelling good, you've got on your clean clothes. you go in, you apply for the job, and you somehow get the job. What are the problems you run into there? You're obviously not able to then keep your belongings secure.
Exactly. The idea of getting the job in the first place, the picture that you painted of the young guy all cleaned up, is only partially accurate. He's all cleaned up, but he's got the same shoulder bag, the same backpack, and the same sleeping bag that he's got to carry around with him everywhere he goes. If he sets it down in the park, everything that's worth more than $5 an item will be stolen by someone who wants to pawn it, and everything that's worth less than $5 an item will be hauled off by the Park Service. And the guys from the Park Service are only doing their job. At the time they come across it, it's going to be a scattered, ugly-looking mess, because the ice heads, the downer heads, the general ne'er-do-wells will have completely rifled it. In order to do anything like that, like in my camp, it takes two of us, because there are two of us staying here. Robert is free to go do his laundry and not have to carry every single thing he owns in the world with him when he does it. I'm free to go to the store and buy food and walk back, because I don't have to worry that someone's going to steal my cell phone charger while I'm gone and swap it for $10 worth of methamphetamines.
But you're not free to go to the store together.
We're not free to both go to the store at any time. No, hell no. It's also the case that at any time while I'm gone, the likelihood of some sweep happening or someone complaining and a cop showing up and wanting me to move out doesn't go down, just because I've got a friend babysitting my pet and my camp while I go to the store. Mm-hmm. I know that I could come back and find a flatbed truck parked beside my camp, a cop directing traffic, and county workers loading up everything I own, and find out that the SPCA already has Roy. The barriers are very, very significant and noticeable. The simple fact of keeping yourself in clean clothes to go to work every morning is a challenge and a half. A partial solution to that kind of a problem is public shower facilities that actually have hot water and mirrors and are inside, so that you can wash the parts of you that actually smell bad without getting busted for indecent exposure. And locker facilities, places where a person could, like the lockers that used to be at bus stations. Mm-hmm. You put your stuff in it, you feed in your quarters or whatever, you take the key with you, your stuff is safe till you come back. Mm-hmm. There's no reason there can't be that.
People think that they want to discourage homelessness, and that is a solution, that making it more difficult to live outside will persuade people to simply no longer be homeless. And I don't totally understand the logic behind it, but we hear it all the time. And when you see, the new laws you were talking about earlier, where it's these enforcements that make it easier to persecute and prosecute people that are homeless. But it sounds like the real solution for that hypothetical guy earlier that ended up homeless, that wants to work and have a job, is to actually ease the transition by creating those things you're talking about, which actually would make it easier in the meantime for him to not have a home in order to facilitate him.
Yeah, but you're talking about homeless people. You're not shooting at a stationary target, you're hunting high-flying birds, in a manner of speaking. You're going to have to take a shotgun approach. There's no reason in the world not to have partially or completely private-funded, state-funded, federally funded, whatever, dormitory that'll house 60 guys and has a labor pool, licensed day labor pool built right into it, where the locals know that they can go get someone to mow their lawns, rake their stuff, do their groundskeeping, construction people. You get to know the guy. You see that he's actually pretty good at that. Just for fun, you have him nail a few cement forms together. You find out he can handle a hammer without cracking his own ankle. So you give him a shot. Now he's got a shot at a job. Maybe someday he'll move out of the dorm into a house. There's no reason not to have that. But that can't be all you do. You can't make anything like that be the solution. or you're going to end up herding a whole bunch of people, really undesirable, all into the same place all together. Whatever's the worst disease any one of them has, they all have it now. And someone's going to burn the place down from the inside or the outside. It's a problem that has to be addressed from the attitude of a human issue. What is the problem? If the problem is the smell in the park, open the restrooms, put in a security guard. It's a hell of a lot cheaper than what you're doing now. Last year, the island of Oahu, county of Honolulu, had something like $223 million added to their annual budget for dealing with the homelessness issue. They could have done things to discourage homelessness. What few things they did discouraged the homeless themselves, who were already plenty discouraged enough.
Sure. So something I see a lot of where I live on Oahu is the families. We see a lot of children, a lot of moms with kids that live in a camp kind of similar to yours, but in a much bigger area that's full of other people living with similar like shanty and in tents, and they're they have kids in school that are going to school and coming home to live in this tent, and it's difficult for them. And I think the main thing they have going for them is that there are so many other people, that they have neighbors that they can kind of keep an eye out for each other.
The reason that they clump up is because we're social animals, and the reason that we're social animals is so we can help keep track of each other's kids, and so that one lady can go get water without having to take her whole family with her, and some other lady can keep an eye on the kids. And and they're going to school and they're keeping them clean and they're doing their homework, and it's not just them. There's at least 3 that I know of, school teachers on Oahu, who live in tents in homeless camps because they're not paid enough to rent an apartment on Oahu. And so these are homeless kids and householder kids going to school and being taught by their favorite teacher, who turns out to be homeless. And you might wonder what they're going to grow up thinking of you, by the way, knowing that in your society their favorite teacher lives in a tent in the park and the police come chase her around about once a month. And it turns out that on Maui, for example, assuming a 40-hour work week, you have to make $14 an hour to live in an efficiency one-room apartment. What you're actually going to get on Maui is $10.45 an hour for a 36-hour week. One of my best friends basically ran the kitchen at one of the busiest and most popular restaurants on the Strip, and lived in his van because he could not afford to rent an efficiency apartment on what they were paying. Right now, he's co-running fairly good-sized catering service, fleet of catering trucks. If part of the deal wasn't that he could park his van in the same lot where the trucks are parked, he couldn't afford to take the job. They'll tell you straight up on Maui that if you're anything below the $100,000 a year level, you got to expect to take part of your salary and climb it. You're actually paying for the privilege of being in the tropics. And that's true for the working people even more than me. Here's a little inside joke. 15 years ago, when I lived in Santa Fe, I didn't have to pay 79 cents a cup for my coffee because someone else bought it for me. Inflation is such that now that I live on Maui, I don't have to pay $5 a cup for my coffee because someone else buys it for me. I'm not really the one that's being hurt. It's your kids that are being hurt. They're going to be working at a job for 10 or 15 years before they can afford to move out of your basement. I already live outside. I have no rent. I have no utilities. Occasionally some nice person buys me a sack of batteries for my headlight. Other than that, I don't have much in the way of overhead. You guys are killing yourselves.
Would you prefer to be in a home?
I would prefer to have the option. Right this second in my life, I'm at a place where it would really be great if I could rent an efficiency apartment or somebody's garage or something like that for 2 months. empty my storage locker and my camp into it, reorganize, repair, clean, launder, build, fix, and move back out. It would be great for me to have the option of moving in and out. That's not that outlandish a thing that I'm asking for. George Washington lived half of his life homeless, living on rafts and in the beds of wagons. I'm not asking for anything that outlandish. All I'm asking is that if you're going to call yourself a free country, act like you know what those big old four-letter words like free actually mean. If you're going to tell me that it's a free country, and then you're going to tell me that I cannot sleep outside, the next thing you're going to tell me is that I have to pay somebody to sleep inside, which means I have to go get a job to get the money to sleep inside, which means you've told me that I have to go work for Frank and take the money that Frank gives me and go give it to his brother Bill for permission to sleep in a little wooden box that Bill built because you said so. It's not freedom if I don't have an option. The difference between an honored guest and a prisoner is 3 words: free to go.
The king is dead and we're to blame. He lost his head, now we're to blame. They simply said we're all the same, measured in an ounce of